Hey everyone, it's Karlie.
Hey, it's Shamina,
And
and we're emotionful.
woo woo.
What are we talking about today, Karlie?
Oh man, I just had a brain fart. We are talking about impending loss. Um, all of the different things that can cause that. And we're just gonna go with it, man. So before we get started, though, we want to shout out Joanne Stewart, Kevin Gallagher, and Therese Gallagher. I can't talk as much because I get a tickle in my throat when I talk. Um, but we want to thank them for being patrons. And if you haven't already, check out our Patreon page. Shamina, take over.
And let's get emotionful.
Woo, yes.
All right. So we are talking about impending loss today. So our last couple of episodes of this season are dedicated to our viewers and some of the questions and feedback that we've received throughout this season of different types of topics that you all would like to see discussed. And yeah, so this particular topic was brought to our attention by one of our viewers and wanting us to kind of discuss like how to cope with impending loss, those types of things. So if you're listening, this is for you.
And I would just like to point out, I this is like off topic and we'll get to it in another episode, but whenever now people say coping, I think it's very interesting because I've learned everyone's coping is different. Obviously there's healthy coping, unhealthy coping, and so like that can be categorized, but like for me in general, like I've realized that journaling is a really big coping for me and it really helps me release like how I'm feeling. But there's other types, but let's dig in first with Shamina giving us the professional definition and description and all that fun stuff of impending loss.
I think you overestimate my abilities.
Well,
So,
then I would like to just say that briefly, I looked into it and impending loss is interesting. The way that I think I interpreted it is like it's almost like you see it, you know it's coming. And for me, the very first thing I thought of was my bopshi because she had ovarian cancer and she went through chemo, then she was in remission, then she relapsed again, then she was in remission again. And actually, I think the last time when she had actually passed, I don't even think it was cancer related. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if we know that, but it's weird because I think I've said it in past episodes. There was like a month where she went to the hospital, then she was released, but literally like less than a month and she had passed. But it was expecting. So it was like, kind of like that buildup of we knew it was happening. And to me, I guess that's how I see impending loss of like you see something coming. And I don't think for me with death at least it made it that much easier. I think it made it harder to cope with because like yeah, you saw it coming, but it's like that's not I don't know. For me, I didn't think that. But anyways,
the my first thought is when we got this question to kind of talk about impending loss, the first thing that came to my mind was anticipatory grief. So we're talking more specifically kind of about like death and dying at the moment, but we're gonna kind of generalize that in a little bit. So anticipatory grief is basically like the example that Karlie just kind of gave, is that we know that somebody is going to pass away, and so it's not one of the like 5 stages of grief from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross.
Pre-stage.
What?
I said it's a pre-stage.
Yeah, I thought you said Kristen. I was like, who's Kristen?
Mama.
That's true. Um, you made me forget what I was gonna say. But
You said it's not one of the 5 stages.
yeah, so it's not one of the 5 stages, but it's definitely a stage of grief and loss that we experience and go through. And I think impending loss and anticipatory grief seem very synonymous. And I think if we're on the topic of like death and dying, I would agree with what you had said earlier, Karlie, of like, I feel like it's not, it doesn't make it any easier. Cause even when, you know, my grandmother passed away, she went into the hospital, and then from the time she went into the hospital to the time she died, it was only 6 days. And so there was a point that they had told us, you know, that she was not going to regain consciousness, that, you know, the only thing they could do was like make her comfortable. And so we transfer her to hospice, that kind of stuff. So I thought you gasped. I thought you were like,
oh no, so I'm just, you know, congested.
very congested right now.
I'm going through something right now, y'all.
She has emotional allergies, so please accept her presentation today.
Yes.
Not COVID related, we don't think. But we'll see. So even like when my grandmother's experience, you know, we knew it happened very quickly, so there wasn't a lot of time for us to process, but then there did come a point to where we knew she was going to die. And I think for me, that almost made it worse, because I ended up leaving before she had passed away. And to some degree, I still kind of question that decision, because I couldn't wait to watch her die. I was able to like say what I needed to say. And the idea of like waiting around and just watching her die was very painful and excruciating to me. Like I understand the kind of value and the importance. And I think now looking back, I would have liked to be there and just, you know, having that support and knowing that she knew that I was there, but also I stand by my decision, because I have a very complicated relationship with death as it is. And I don't know how I would have reacted if I actually saw her die.
So I think it's interesting that you made that choice, because for me, I think sometimes I still get mad at myself that I wasn't there when Bopsy had passed. I can remember being there the night before, and I had brought my friend, and so because I had brought my friend, I had to go back to my, like, where I was living. And I remember the next morning, it was like early, and my brother called and was like, you need to get here quickly, she's not breathing. And I think she had already passed, but he didn't want to like pretty much tell me that. And I just remember I remember just not even thinking. I just grabbed my keys, and I remember thinking on the way there, because I was going like hella fast, and I just remember being like, I don't care if I get pulled over. And like luckily I didn't, but I remember getting there and it was too late. And like I think that's something that I still get upset with myself about, of like, I wish I was there. You know, like every time I was there, I would talk to her and stuff. But I don't know, like I just feel like for me, I would want to have been there. So I don't know. I guess
I'm torn, because I've even asked, we had some family members who did stay with her, and I've reached out to them, you know, since everything has happened. And I had asked, was it easier for you in your grieving process because you were there? And I get kind of mixed messages. And one of my family members had said no, because it's almost like PTSD in that moment just keeps replaying like over and over and over for them. And
Mm-hmm.
that I very much understand, because I definitely think that would be something that's just like constantly living in my mind, is like I watch that as opposed to me leaving. I knew she was going to die and I was able to say what I wanted to say to her as a final goodbye. And then that
Mm-hmm.
was my like closure, and that was my peace. And that's how I remember it, as opposed to remembering her death, if that makes sense.
Well, it does. And actually what's interesting, because I think about it, because my grandma, who just recently, she was the last one of my grandparents to pass, and it's coming up on a year now. With her, I was happy I wasn't there when she had passed, because I think I don't know if it was just because of what I was going through with everything else, but I don't think I could have emotionally handled it if I was there. And so like for that one, I was just told, and for me, that was the choice I wanted, and I'm still happy with that choice of like you said, like I did go and visit her and I said everything I had to say. I told her I loved her and all of that, but I don't think I could have been there, because I think it was just too, I don't know. I think as I'm getting older, I'm like, ooh, like I'm not, like so yeah, with that one, I think for me with Bopshi, I felt like I didn't have a choice. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's what makes me mad, is
Yeah.
like I didn't get that choice. But with my grandma, I did. And I'm happy with my choice of I went and visited, I said my goodbyes, and I'm okay with
Yeah.
that.
I think that that's a really great point, is that like with Bobshi, you didn't have a choice. And I think if I didn't have a choice, like if, she just died when we went home for the night, in the hospital or what have you, I think that would have been very, very difficult for me,
Mhm.
as opposed to like having that time to say goodbye and kind of being in like the impending loss, anticipatory grief piece.
Mhm.
Um, because, even from a clinical perspective, if we don't have that choice, there's always like this sense of like a lack of closure, or I'm not able to say what I needed to say, or it
Mhm.
that makes the grieving process more challenging, because I think it's challenging regardless of the way that we experience it. But it causes a lot more rumination of, I wish this was different, or I
Mhm.
wish that I could have said this, or that kind of thing. And so there's less um, closure is the only word that I can really think of from that type of perspective. But it's also, even if you've ever experienced that type of situation in your life, it's extremely possible to get closure without actually having that person involved in the process. And that's something to potentially kind of explore in therapy. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll say that's kind of what I've been doing, because although I started therapy for a whole nother reason, it also kind of dipped into the fact that I've not really grieved Bopshi's loss. And I think for me, that's been the hardest grandparent, because like my Bopshi and Jaju live very close, and my Jaju, I was only in third grade when he passed. So I think I was able to like go through the grieving process. But then with my Bopshi, I was 21 or something. Like I had just turned 21. And I think that's when you kind of get into the cycle of like, you take a day or two and then you get back into your life. And like for me, I was just like, and I could not talk about her. So actually, one thing that my therapist has helped me is like, she's like, well, write her letters. Like, like when you're journaling, just, like put them to her, let her know what's going on, things like that. And that actually has helped. And like sometimes I'll talk to her, like if I'm driving in the car, I'll just let her know I miss her or whatever. I'll talk to her a little bit, and I do that. I don't know. But I would like to also, I don't know if you're going to go on this, but I think we should also acknowledge that impending loss is not just with death, but like what I was reading was like divorce. Um, um, what was the other one I read out loud to you?
Like anything, being laid off from a job,
Yeah.
divorce, relationship ending, you ending a relationship, having a surgery and losing like a part of yourself.
So I have a question for you, Shamina, and I don't know if you can answer. Would you say impending loss is anything that you can expect to end? And grieving, like, I don't know, I feel like right now I'm getting confused of like what's the difference then with grieving. Like I get, like you said, like I feel like your statement earlier of like impending loss is like almost synonymous with anticipatory grief, because it's like you know something's about to be over or ending, whether it's a marriage, a job, a relationship, and even though those may be really good reasons that they're ending, like maybe your job is ending because you got a better job, or the job's ending because you quit because it was toxic, but it's still something to like grieve because it's ending, you know? And I think sometimes for me, I think what really needs to be acknowledged is accepting that it's okay to be sad about something that's ending, even though it's in your best interest. Obviously, with death and stuff, that's not, but like in regards of like the job and things like that, like I think when you get a new job or whatever, people are like, oh, that's so exciting, congratulations. But it's okay if like a part of you is still like, I'm kind of bummed, or even if it wasn't your best interest, you got out of a toxic relationship, but you still may grieve that because um that's what you were used to.
Yeah. So I think to answer your question, yes, I would agree with that statement because I think our first example was just through the lens of like death and dying, because that tends to be the like initial thought that most people will have. You mentioned like impending loss, it's somebody's dying or somebody's going to die or what have you. But I definitely agree with you that I think it's anything in our lives that we recognize is going to end, or and we have that preparation ahead of time. So I would generalize it to absolutely anything, because we are constantly grieving, even if it's the smallest thing, like you go to the grocery store and you choose name brand pizza sauce over, whatever, like, and, maybe that one's more, and you're grieving the loss of like those couple dollars that you're, spending instead. And so we grieve all the time, but the intensity and the severity and the circumstances around the grief are very different given the situation that we're in. Like, I'm not going to grieve whether I got this, I don't know, this book over this one the same way that I'm going to grieve the loss of my grandmother. Like, those are going to be two completely different ways of grieving. Or, oh, that's a better one. Like, I didn't get this job, but I got this one instead, but my grandma's dead. So that's a completely different type of emotional experience, but we're constantly doing this all the time. And so I think with the question of like, how do you cope with impending loss, there's no right or wrong answer, because we all cope with it differently and we all cope with change differently. And that's ultimately kind of what this is rooted in, is that something is changing, whether it's for a positive outcome or a negative one. We have to kind of move forward and adapt with that. And we're not very good with change, most of us.
So I will say, in terms of coping, as a basic bystander who is very sensitive and emotional, I would say for me, I'm learning to be, but I would say for me, the first step is acknowledging that you are sad about something, and that being okay, and to allow yourself to experience it, because I think, like, again, like, let's say
Well, I wouldn't even, because you said sad, but I would just say to acknowledge any emotion that
yeah,
you're experiencing or feeling, because there may be so much more that's coming up than just sadness. So
yeah, thank you. And I think, like, for an example, like, I'm trying to think of one, but like um
I mean, use your relationship. You knew that you were going to end it, or, you know,
Yeah.
was going to like move out of your house and things were going to be final, or
Yeah, okay. I guess that's a good one of like knowing that like I don't well, it's interesting because I feel like again like the
I'm
beginning.
like, is Karlie not gonna mention this? This is what we started the podcast about. Like,
I know, but this is how you know I'm growing because now this isn't my first thought. Like my first thought was not like, oh, my ex. It's like, oh, and then you had to. So that's kudos for me.
you all just witnessed a growth and healing moment, right? In vivo, live in action.
Yes, but anyway, okay, I'll use my breakup. So yeah, like breaking up with him, like at the end of the day, like I knew it was what was best and it was a good thing. But I was still like really hurt and like sad and like scared. Like I was scared because it was a really big change that I was about to make. Like I was living with the dude. And so yeah, I mean like I'm still healing and there's still sometimes where I'm like sad or I miss him and what I'm learning is I don't miss him. I miss company. I miss that stuff. But yeah, I guess that's a good example of like, yeah, it was in my best interest to do that and like whatever. And so sometimes I felt like I had to like be tough in a sense of like not show my emotions to people because they were like, why are you sad? Like, this is a good thing. But it was like, yeah, it is a good thing. But this person's also been in my life for over 5 years. They were like my go to, they were my companion. And as much as it is healthier for me to be moving on by myself, like, I'm sad. Or, you know, this is going to be hard. It's weird. It's a weird mixture of feelings. There's a lot of feelings that hit you. And I think that was the hardest thing for me to handle was all of these feelings coming at me and not knowing what the fuck to do. Like, you know, like I'm sad, I'm scared, but then I'm happy and I'm like, yeah, F him. But then I'm like, no, I'm sad. Like, I can still remember having to call Shamina when I'm in the shower, or else I would cry. Like, I had to be on the phone with someone all of the time. And like, I needed Shamina to tell me about her ex relationship pasts, like her previous, like the negatives, because it would make me feel better, you know? Like, that was a weird thing, but like hearing the negative stuff of other people's past relationships was like, okay, that makes me feel better, you know? So it's a lot of weird emotions that you kind of feel all day at the same time. Like you could go through 20 emotions in one day and it's like, oh my gosh, this is exhausting.
Yeah. And I'll kind of give an example different from our relationship, but almost a year ago now, I was in a traditional 9 to 5 job. I was working for a agency, um, 40 hours a week, all the things, PTO, benefits, all that fun stuff. And it was at the end of September that I made the decision to leave my job. And so I had to put in a 30 days notice because in counseling, you put in 30 days, not 2 weeks, because you're dealing with people's lives. And you can't just be like, I see 2 weeks is enough notice for you to cope and deal with things on your own. Like, bye. So I had this month of kind of this impending loss of this job. I made the decision to go into private practice, and I was very excited about the transition because I wanted more freedom, more flexibility. I got to do telehealth full time, and that was something the agency wasn't allowing me to do anymore. I was very excited about this, but I was also terrified from a financial aspect, going from a salary job to starting in private practice and having to build up my caseload, which means I'm building up my paycheck from nothing, basically. And so I was terrified. I felt really guilty that I was leaving my clients because I had been there for over a year and I'd been working with some of these people for over a year. I felt so sad when I when I finally left, and as I was starting to tell my clients, because each client, and I maybe had, I don't even know, like 60 to 70 clients like on my caseload that I had to kind of tell this to. And so each time I told the client, I was experiencing this loss all over again because of their reaction. And, you know, I have to like be okay. And some clients, I'm like holding back tears, like, I want to be okay. But I think from a therapist perspective, like leaving a job, even though it was a really great opportunity, I'm super happy where I'm at now in the practice where I work. I was so overcome with this constant grief because I not only had to say goodbye to, you know, where I was working. We had a fantastic team. I really liked being part of the team. We were in person, like all of these wonderful things that were accompanying the job. But now I had to say goodbye to each and every one of my clients. And that was heartbreaking because I had to experience this multiple times throughout the you know, span of a month. And that's a lot of grief all at once. And then even after, when I was in, you know, the private practice and trying to get back on my feet, I still think about my clients now, and it's been almost a year, and I wonder like how they're doing. Will they remember me? You know, did I help them? Those types of things. And I really liked what Karlie had said of just being able to acknowledge how you're feeling given the circumstance or the situation. Just because we know that we're going to experience some type of loss doesn't necessarily make it easier, because we may not know how to prepare for it or how to even cope with the emotions that come up.
Not to cut you off, but you made me think of something and I didn't want to lose it. I think knowing you're losing something doesn't mean that you should be able to handle it better, or that you should already have like gotten over it because you knew it was happening. I think when you know it's happening, it almost makes it worse and extends that grief, because it's like, oh my gosh, like, so just to add on that, but then I have a question for you, Shamina's. So other than like acknowledging that, what are some examples of what people can do in terms of coping with acknowledging impending loss, dealing with impending loss, working on impending loss, grieving impending loss, all of that? Give me all the goodies.
Teach me how to do this in 20 minutes, what you would do in 6 months in therapy.
Yes, give me therapy for free. Because
Karlie says this, but this is a disclaimer. I don't give therapy away for free. That's unethical. I don't counsel Karlie, even though she says that I do. I do not. It's part of my personality. I have this. So
she makes my decisions for me. She tells me what to do. I have to call her and she helps me.
Now tell people that I don't do that.
All right, I'm kidding. She doesn't do it.
So anyway, just to make that clear, if you want my advice, you can become a client and I will give it to you for a negotiated fee. Or if you happen to be close to me, then you get a little tidbit free of charge.
Or just listen to this podcast.
That's true too. So I think the identification of emotions is one, and recognizing that you're experiencing whatever, because we may so identify the emotions, but we don't want to acknowledge that we're going through them, that this is hard for us, blah, 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 blah. All of the kind of like denial stuff that we tend to experience, or the avoidance, like, you know, the meme where everything's on fire in the background. It's like, I'm fine. You know, I don't know how many people, myself included, were like, no, it's fine. Everything's fine. I can handle this. It's okay.
I'm fine.
Yeah. So I definitely think those things, I would say relying on your support system, whatever that looks like during this particular time, and being able to vocalize how you are feeling, because it can be very isolating and lonely if we're not able to rely on any type of support system during that time. I also think there's something to be said about when we experience impending loss, usually most of the time, it may be it may be out of our control. Sometimes it's initiated by us, kind of like what I had said with the, leaving my job, choosing to leave my job. Karlie chose to leave her relationship. So some of these are conscious choices. Other times things just happen to us. And so even though we make the choice, sometimes it may seem like the chain of events that happen afterwards is out of our control. And we don't do well when things aren't within our control, particularly if you ever experience any type of anxiety. With my anxiety clients, anything that's out of their control, they're like, Shamina, I am going into panic mode because I need to be in control. It helps my anxiety. I'm like, I feel you. I know I have anxiety. This is me. This is me. You're speaking to me. So when these things kind of happen, whether you initiate them or life does for you, I think being able to kind of hone in on your locus of control. What are the things in your life that are still constant and are within your ability to control? So some of those things could be like your basic daily needs. You can control your eating habits. You can control going out and getting exercise, your sleep, your personal hygiene. Those are very basic things that if those are off, everything else is going to be off and game over. And I think that's something I really emphasize with my clients when things start to kind of change around them, whether they do it or not, that get very overwhelmed and we get swept up and lost in all of the transition that's going on. And so being able to slow things down and focus on what can I do about this? What can I control in this situation?
I 100% agree. And I would like to point out the importance of leaning on your support system, because for me in the very beginning, I was trying to handle it myself. I was trying to act like everything was okay. I want to say from October until mid-February, I was like, yeah, my friends knew, but I was not letting into how serious and how much it was affecting me. And or even my family, like I was not big on letting my family know what was going on. And I think that's because I knew they would not be cool with me not being happy. And I don't think I'll ever forget this day, but the day that I had the therapy session and pretty much was real with myself of I think I was lying to myself thinking that things were okay. And I think that was the day that I was finally real with myself that things were not okay. And then I just remember like walking into my parents' room and my dad looked at me and was like, "What's wrong?" And I just started bawling my eyes out. I couldn't even talk. And he jumped up and he was like, "Oh my God." Like, he's like, he's like, you always have us. And I just remember like I cried in his arms for like 2 minutes. And then like I cried with my mom. And I think that's when I was just like, I can't do this. Like, and that's obviously the day that I was like, I'm staying with my parents until, but yeah, I just remember like that was finally, I think, when I was real with myself and I opened up to my support system of like, yeah, nope, I'm not okay. Not okay. Things are hard and I need help. And I think that was probably the starting point for me to start to dig into what was going on, because although we broke up in October, I kept trying to not act like it was real or make things seem like they were easier and more okay than they were, and it wasn't as hard on me as it was. But I think because I was acting that way, I wasn't able to really tap into working on myself and healing from the pain that I was going through, because I wasn't even allowing myself to feel it. But then I think, like I said, in February, when I was like real with myself and my family, that's when I was finally able to start working on healing that.
And Karlie brings up a really good point that sometimes just making the decision to confide in your support system that you're not okay or that you need support or that you're going through something that's a very vulnerable position to be in, because Karlie is an extremely supportive family. So it was, as difficult as it was for her to open up, she was received with, they were able to hold space for her emotions, and that's not the case for everybody. And so if that is a decision that you choose to make, I think it's being able to recognize the people within your support system that are going to hold space for your emotions and be able to provide a positive kind of supportive environment, as opposed to, you know, I can remember when um, I had like told people, you know, kind of about like the breakup that I was going to be like going through, and different things. And there were some people that it was met with like resistance and or judgment or criticism. And immediately had regretted telling them I didn't want to deal with it, because I was already going through my own stuff as it was. And I didn't need anybody else's bullshit to be put onto me, because that was enough. So I think it's also kind of recognizing who within your support system can you rely on when you want to be vulnerable, and kind of asking for help and asking for these types of things, because it's not going to be, you know, every single person, or even your family may not be included in your support system, and that's completely okay. But we are very social creatures. We've survived this long because we stick together, whether it's, you know, within families, whether it's within counties, whether it's within countries, like what have you. We need other people in order to survive. Otherwise, we would be totally fine in isolation 24/7 all alone. But I think the pandemic has taught us that we aren't. So kind of recognizing some of those things. And I think Karlie brings up a really good point, is that having to admit that you're not okay to yourself is very challenging. That's probably one of the more challenging things, is just being able to acknowledge, like, I'm not okay. I have to do these things. And that's something, again, you can work through with your support system. If you're in therapy or interested in being in therapy, something you can work through with your therapist. Being able to kind of do it on your own, it's not impossible, but it may be a little more challenging to kind of navigate some of these bigger emotions or bigger stressors and experiences. But that moment of strength and courage when you're able to admit it and to recognize that you want to do something about it is huge. And that shapes and is the catalyst for kind of a healing journey of impending loss, having to grieve the loss when it does happen. How do I cope with all of these feelings and things that are coming up? And there's no, like I said, there's no like right or wrong way. You get to figure that out and figure out what's going to be best for you. Maybe it's hanging out with your dog, letting your dog lick your face while you record a podcast episode. Maybe it's I just called this bitch out.
I feel attacked right now because I had a really good point. As I was listening to everything you said, I was going to say also, sometimes we may realize that our support system is people we don't even know. So I was going to say, depending on what you're going through, sometimes like reaching out and finding like support groups like AA or things like that, because when Shamina was talking about her breakup, I'll probably say I was probably someone that responded in probably not the best way. And I've told her a million times, like, I'm so sorry, because I think I didn't know what she was going through because I had never been through it. And I think I've told her this a million times, that now that I've gone through like a breakup and like heartache and stuff, I'm like, oh my gosh, like it's like like, you know, like it's empathy, you know, like I literally, the empathy that I have now has grown, because yeah, I might have been sympathetic for her, but I never knew what she was feeling. So like I can, like, thinking back, like when my friends would go through breakups before I had ever gone through one, I'm like, girl, you don't need him, just put on a good song. And like, but now I'm like, okay, it's not that easy, like, you know. So I probably was that person who responded to Shamina in probably not the most helpful way, and I think about that all the time, and I know I've told her a million times, but like, I'm just like, dang, like, I'm so sorry, because now that I've experienced it, I'm like, if someone would have responded to me like that, I'd probably been like, screw you. So anyways, what I was getting at is sometimes, unfortunately, like your close friends and family who you would typically have as your support system, maybe they don't know what you're going through. Like maybe you just were diagnosed with something life altering. And as much as they want to be there for you, they may only be able to sympathize for you and with you, but not empathize. And you may need someone who can understand exactly what you're going through to really help you. Because I think if I was surrounded by a whole bunch of people who had never been through a breakup when I went through mine, I probably would have gone crazy of like, these people don't know what the heck I'm feeling. So I just wanted to add that point as my dog was licking my face. Thank you. And I don't let her lick all of my face. I tuck my lips in.
I can't. But yes, Karlie brings up a fantastic point of, even if you think that they may be people, they may not have enough emotional awareness to show up for the way that you need them to. And, I've kind of gone throughout, I've had multiple people in my life who haven't been able to do that. And so now I can recognize and discern, like, okay, with this topic, do not go to that person because it's not going to end well and you're going to feel shitty and worse when you walk away. So just having that type of awareness also is going to be super helpful. And just, kind of utilizing what do I want to say? I know what I want to say, but I don't know what I want to say. I would encourage people to allow themselves to feel the emotions that they're feeling, because that's kind of the epitome of what we do in therapy, and what you're learning in therapy is like how to change the relationship with your emotions and how to be okay when they happen instead of pushing them away or rejecting them or avoiding them, because that's what most of us do, is we don't acknowledge them or allow them to have space. I use the example a lot with my clients as like a pressure cooker. So the longer it's in there, the more pressure there is, and it's building and building and building, and then you take the top off and all of this, as opposed to you're slowly ventilating the pressure cooker, and then when you open it, it's like, oh, no steam hit me. That's cool. Because you've been letting it out kind of a little bit at a time and allowing yourself to process or to acknowledge or to feel whatever it is that comes up. Experience any type of impending loss.
And I would say too, for the folks who maybe don't have a support system or don't turn to their support system, I would try journaling, or recently I've learned about video journaling, or, just maybe meditating, talking to yourself. I don't know. But
finding some alternative way to process your emotions or giving space for them, even if you don't involve other people. So I think Karlie gave really great examples of things to be able to kind of do, because if we do nothing, then nothing will change. We're not going to, kind of go through the motions of our emotions. We're not going to be able to heal because we're not working at it. It's like you want to lose weight, but you don't ever go to the gym or work out ever. And you're like, why don't I lose weight? Well, because you don't do anything. So it's the same thing with our emotions.
Now I have a question for you, Shamin. What if it's not I that is experiencing the impending loss, but it is my close person, whether it's a close friend, a significant other? Then what? How do I cope with knowing that my person is experiencing this? So it's not specifically like me coping with the impending loss, but me coping with the fact that this person that I'm close with is experiencing something that maybe I can't help.
So are you asking me more of on an individual level, how do you deal with somebody else that you know experiencing something, or how do you support somebody who's experiencing that and you may not be able to like understand or help them?
I guess both, like, cause this is just something I'm thinking of, because like, one, I want to be able to support them even though I may not be experiencing or have ever experienced what they're going through, but also I feel like them going through something like that could probably, I mean, depending on what it is, like, I feel like if it was like just getting a new job, I don't know how much that would really, I mean, it depends on how close. If it's like your significant other, then, and they're with you all the time, then yeah. But both questions, I guess I want you to answer. How can I help myself cope with it, but how can I also be of additional support to someone going through something that I don't know about?
So I'll speak on the support piece first. When you are a support system for somebody who's going through whatever it is, usually our go-to is we want to fix it. How can I fix this? How can I make you feel better? How can I silver line this? How can I, lighten up the mood of the situation? We kind of talked about this a little bit with like our initial grief and loss episode in season 1. So what you can do is hold space for whoever is experiencing whatever they're experiencing, and they're coming to you as a support system. So hold space and ask them, what type of support do you need from me? Do you want me to problem solve with you? Do you want me to give you advice? Do you just want me to sit here and listen? Because then you're allowing them to communicate, this is what I need from you, instead of us assuming, well, this is what I would want, or, like, I'm really uncomfortable with the emotions that you're like displaying right now, Karlie. So you need to make that stop because you're making me uncomfortable. So that's essentially what empathy is we don't have to experience every single thing that somebody else has in order to empathize with them. It's less about the content and the specific event and more about the underlying emotions. Because even if, let's say, Karlie, you had a miscarriage, and I've never been pregnant. I've never had a miscarriage. I have no idea what that is. But some of the emotions that you're going through, I can understand that because I've experienced sadness, I've experienced grief, I've experienced loss, I've experienced anger, and those may be some of the things that come up for you. And that's what empathy is that I can tap into that emotion myself and recognize and hold space for your emotional experience as well. So I think being able to like hold space and then asking them for the type of support that they need, and kind of going from there and allowing them to take the lead. If they don't know, you can ask, like, hey, do you think it would be helpful if I gave you advice right now? And if they're like, no, probably not, then okay, great. Sometimes I do that with my clients. They come to me and they're like, Shamina, this is what's going on. And I don't want to assume that I know what they need. And so I'll ask them, I'll say, do you need me to help you kind of problem solve through this? Or do you need me to just kind of sit here and listen to you today and allow you just to have this space and this time to communicate how you're feeling? And I put it back on them and they'll tell me, and I'm like, okay, great. Now I know where to go with this session.
And I think that that's one thing that I really like that you said that I'm trying to be better at is like, Blue, stop, is like asking what is needed of me, because I used to always live by the rule, treat people how you want to be treated, but I'm learning some people don't want to be treated the way I want to be treated, So I'm realizing like, okay, like obviously you want to treat people like with kindness and stuff, but I'm learning like you have to ask, like don't assume this is just with even just like the littlest things, like with the tone, like don't assume someone's tone, like ask them, be like, yo, is this what you meant? Or like just a minor thing. Someone said something like, well, I said I would go pick it up. And I'm like, okay, but that I didn't know that meant this as well. Like you have to be like, hey, I'm willing to pick it up and pay for it or whatever it is. Like I can't read minds. And so I think it's I think it's just like like most people think like asking questions is like a negative thing and it makes you look dumb, but it's like, no, I'm sorry, I don't want to assume, like, yeah, I'm not stupid, but also I don't want to assume this because everyone is different. So I feel like when it comes to behavior and emotions and stuff, like the more questions you can ask, the better. Like obviously you don't want to overwhelm someone, especially if they're going through something at that time. But I think it's better to ask than just be like, well, they need my advice. Like, no, actually, I just need you to listen because I need to vent and get this off my chest. So I'm learning that now though. So yeah.
Yeah. So that would be part one of Karlie's question. Part two, I think it depends on the closeness and the type of relationship that you have with the person who's going through something. So, you know, if your significant other is experiencing some type of like impending loss, that's going to look a lot different than a friend that you only talk to maybe like 2 to 3 times a year type of thing. So I think it's hard to answer because it's a general question, but there's more specific nuances behind it. So just kind of recognizing, one, acknowledging like your emotional experience, because even though it's happening to somebody else, it can still have an impact on you, or it could still trigger you, or you could still kind of tap into your own emotions. And so acknowledging like, hey, this is really hard for me, or this brings up this for me, or, you know, sometimes like it's hard for me to listen and be there for you because I'm experiencing X, Y, or Z. You don't want to like take it over and be like, well, now this is all about me and you're making me feel this way, because that's going to be unproductive and unhelpful. But you know, kind of allowing that space, and you, if you feel close enough to that person, like being able to process that with them, like, yeah, when you told me that, like, this was my experience about it, or, you know, I can't believe that X, Y, or Z, and what have you. So there's kind of acknowledging your own experience with it, but recognizing that I think sometimes we feel very helpless when people that we care about are going through things and experiencing big emotions, because it's not our responsibility to fix it. It's not our responsibility to take away the pain or take away their experience to make it better. And so how can you be okay with that is I think a better question. And that's, again, being able to take stock in the fact that whatever type of support you can give to the person is monumental, because you may not feel like you're doing absolutely anything, but to them, all they needed that day was for somebody just to listen, and you were able to do that. And you may not get that big, like, oh my God, thank you, like that was the best thing I could have had today, like that was all that I needed. You get that from that person, but that could have made or break their day, you know. And so checking in with them and kind of saying like, you know, is the support that I'm giving you, is that enough? Or do you feel like I could be doing things more? Sorry, my dog was gonna like go eat things in the litter box, and I was like, nope, we're not doing that. I thought she was. So gross. But, you know, kind of checking in with them and being able to take comfort in the fact that you're not going to be in a position to take away their experience, nor should you. And that's not your role or your job, but just being allowed to be okay with not being able to help.
Yeah, I think, I think that's good, because I think sometimes people take on like the emotions or, you know, kind of thing, or like them not being able to help causes them to feel some type of way. But at the end of the day, like you could be that support, but it's not your responsibility to like take that pain or that hurt or those emotions. They have to, I don't want to say they have to, but they have to experience that and go through that on their own. And like, not that they have to be alone doing it. Like you can be by their side, like again, to provide whatever it is that they feel is necessary to help them, but just ask them and do as much as you can.
And if you feel like you're not doing enough, ask them if you are, because I imagine that they'll probably be like, yeah, you are, like what you're doing is helpful. And, you know, I really appreciate it. And we have a very hard time being okay with that, because we want something tangible. We want to be able to actively fix it, to actively give you advice, to do something. But sometimes the best thing that we can do is just listening. And that's not something that we're usually taught to do. So,
correcto mundo.
Are you all feeling
whole? Oh, we said that at the same time. I guarantee though it's gonna mute one of our voices and it's gonna be like only one of us said it. but we said that at the same time, and we did not plan that.
We did not.
So are you?
Are you?
Are you?
Are you?
Are you?
If not, consider this. We want to know how you all cope and handle impending loss. What are some tips and tricks that you've used in your life and your experience that have been helpful? What type of support have you received that has been really helpful from people when you're kind of going through these experiences? Comment below.
Yeah, what did someone do for you that you appreciated?
Yes. So comment below, DM us on Instagram at EmotionfulPod, message us on Facebook at
Emotionful Podcast.
I was gonna say the Emotionful. I was like, there's no the in front of it.
Like, subscribe, check out our Patreon page.
Yes, all of the things. Do that, please. And we appreciate your continued support. We are wrapping up with season 2 in the next couple of episodes. So we are super stoked to even be here on season 2 and kind of in a position to wrap it up. So stay tuned.
If we didn't get canceled.
Yes. Like manifest, bring back manifest. But Karlie has no idea what that is because she hasn't seen it. So
I know what it is. I've just never seen it.
That's what I just said.
Yeah, but you said Karlie has no idea what that is. I do know what it is. I've just never seen it.
All right. You're right.
I'm not Patrick. I don't live under a rock. Ha 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 ha.
I was like, who's Patrick? But that makes sense. So let us know. Subscribe below. We will see you all next week with another episode with a topic about something one of our viewers brought to us.
Yes. So thank you all for listening. As always, we appreciate it. I'm going to go have some hot tea to soothe this throat of mine.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone.